The voice of sharing. 旅人的香
ASEAN Breakfast Call. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia. Hey, good morning. This
Hi,
is Arlene.
this is Gowri.
Oh, Gowri, you look pretty pink.
Well, I would like to think this is red, but sure.
We have different spectrum of colors that we believe should be pink.
Mm-hmm.
To start off with our news today, do you know what is happening in Kelantan right now? It's really going around in circles, I would say, when it comes to the way Kelantan handles its societal issue, because what Kelantan is focusing right now, instead of cracking down on criminals, they are cracking down on dress codes.
Right, and it's a bit tough in not only in Kelantan but even in Malaysia itself, because we place religion at very high on the ladder and we give it a lot of priority. So every decision you make, every code of ethics, every value eventually goes back to religion. So
But then
they have used that as an excuse here to
But,
come up with this.
I mean, in defense of religion, in Malaysia, Malaysians has always been religion back in the days 100 years ago until now, perhaps in different forms, but they have always been religious. Very few atheists that I know exist in this country, but as far as I know, like majority of people, they are either very much spiritual or they still very much hold, the idea of God within their own lifestyle. But whether when it comes to religion, the state should somehow uphold religious doctrines, that should be another question, because what we see in Kelantan right now, they are cracking down on women who do not wear certain dress code, and this I'm referring to Muslim women who do not wear the full tudung and hijab sort of attire.
It is complicated when the state steps in and brings law into this, because, like you mentioned, religious is supposed to be a spiritual thing. It's supposed to be a way of life, and it also goes back to your choice. And religious policing is, of course, always difficult to uphold, because there are so many criteria, so many challenges as well that comes when you want to really implement that particular rule.
The headline is quite cheeky. No tudung, no business.
that is very cheeky. It's a very good headline by the Star, actually, and it's interesting because they get straight to the point, which is what Kelantan is doing right now. And
how would you feel, Gowri, if the state of Penang imposed that every Indian or Hindu should wear a sari, or should not wear something other than what a sari is?
I think maybe sari is a bit too extreme. Maybe they could make it compulsory to wear the bindi on the forehead. And if you're speaking about that, there have already been multiple pressures from different parties. We don't need the Penang government to intervene.
You were being pressured to wear the bindi.
I was.
And a bindi is a way to sort of differentiate between married women and non-married ones.
Actually, it's a sign of Hindu, and because there are also a lot of Indian Christians around, it differentiates you, whether you're a Hindu or you're a Christian or you're an Indian Muslim. So that is why most people feel like if you're a Hindu, hey, you should be proud of it. Why are you not showing off to people that you're Hindu? Why are you not wearing your bindi? But I know who I am, and I'm sure these people know who they are too, and they don't need a third party coming in and telling them how to dress or how to go about carrying on their daily lives.
That's the problem, isn't it? Like, if you wear bindi because you appreciate the cultural reason or the religious reason depending on how you approach it, then that's fine. But if the state intervene and treat it as if it's part of the religious doctrine, then that's where the problem comes in. Let's say you don't wear bindi and then you are being fined or you are being jailed just for that. The same with what we are seeing in the issue of Kelantan. So local authority have initiated Operasi Gempur Aurat. Is called Operation Aurat Attack. Please, it's not funny, Gowri. It's imposing a maximum fine of 500 ringgit. That's a lot of money, Gowri.
Yeah, this is not funny, yes, but the name of the operation is a little a little hilarious, I would say.
Sounds like Mass Attack, that movie, right?
Right.
Alright, Attack. But 500 ringgit imposed on women traders and workers in Kelantan, considering Kelantan has a lot of its trades being done by women. They are famous for having a huge number of women women doing business. And for them, not just not covering their hair, but also wearing tight outfits, they have the risk of being fined up to 500 ringgit.
Because if you go to Indonesia, you would notice that they are, of course, a majority Muslim country, but over there, it's not even compulsory. It's totally up to you. And of course, we don't have to copy them or be like them, but it's important to give your people the freedom of choice, especially when it comes to religion, because it's a spiritual thing. It has to come from inside you. Like, we had a speaker a few days ago talking about making the Friday prayers compulsory, and she mentioned that, what's the point of just forcing someone to go to the mosque and they just sit there, because if they don't, it's against the law. But I'm just sitting there for nothing, just to escape my punishment. It's not because I'm really here to pray. So it goes back to that whole intention. Yes, you can force people, you can impose all these laws and fines, but if they don't really want to do it, if it doesn't come from within them, then what's the point, really?
And the more religion becomes a state doctrine, the more people or society feel displeasure towards religion and probably leave religion. A lot of countries that are having a high number of people seeing themselves with associating with no religion or becoming a closet atheist are countries where religion becomes a state doctrine, and you see that in countries like Iran. And it's no joke, because religion at its core is supposed to be a source of enlightenment or spiritual journey for many people. But once it becomes a doctrine for the state to impose certain rules to society, that's where people started to see why should we have religion? There's no use for it.
That perfectly makes sense, because if it goes beyond that, if it goes beyond your relationship with God and religion, you kind of lose that sense of, why am I really doing this? If it's not for God, then what's the point? And that would it makes sense if that eventually drives them to reject it, or to get sick of it even, and get tired of doing that, and follow a different path, to say.
I give example of Ramadan. Fasting during Ramadan. I think it's beautiful when a person takes the extra effort to fast the whole day without anyone pressuring them. The person, it shows that you are doing this because you want to focus on the religious belief that you believe in. But when you fast because the state say that if you eat in public or you eat at all, if you are being captured, you can be imposed jail sentence or even fine. And that's where you would rather not fast at all. I mean, what's the purpose? You are not doing this for God. You're just doing this because you have to please the state. And what is being said by the Kota Baru Municipal Council Youth, Women and Islamic Development Committee Chairman Noor Azariza Muhammad Alawi said that the crackdown is actually, interestingly, in response to public complaints. She said that the dress code is one of the conditions for business permits issued by local council.
And of course, at the end of the day, if you really want to change the mindset of people, the best way to go about it is through awareness, is through education, and not by just coming up with some new law and imposing a fine.
Mm-hmm. In fact, non-Muslim business operators also risk being fined if their Muslim employees do not abide by the dress code, as certain employers require their workers to wear tight-fitting uniforms and short-sleeve shirts. Can you imagine, like, let's say you are a businesswoman and then you have a few workers under you and some of them are Malay Muslim women, and how can you regulate your employee? Like, what should they wear, what should they not wear? is a bit ridiculous, right?
It
In order for you to avoid, can you imagine? In order for you to avoid being fined, your little shop, you have to force one of your Muslim worker who probably may not wear the hijab or tudung, and because of that, you have to become this authority, I would say, like an ulama, playing an ulama's role and forcing that person to wear the headscarf. That's a bit too much, isn't it?
it is, but if I was the employer, of course, I will have to do it in order to avoid the fine.
And the ruling applies to Muslim women working in wet markets, supermarkets, hypermarkets, food outlets, and all other commercial centers that require operating licenses from local authorities. And it is also said that 3,000 traders has taken part in this refresher course to sort of understand the Islamic perspective of doing business. And this is somehow a very unique story, and it raises a lot of eyebrows because Kelantan has always been famous for letting its people, especially women, its female society, to be guarded as if they are some kind of child or underage children or like that. Anyway, you're so quiet, Gowri. And anyway, the next news is about Thailand cutting its growth outlook, economic still in doldrums after coup. So it seems like Thailand is cutting its growth, and this is affecting its economy after the military has taken over.
That's right, and these ever since the coup took over, investors have been losing faith in the Thailand economy. Even their own people are actually kind of losing confidence in their own government, in their own administration, and they're not so sure about where the country is heading. And it's still stuck as it was within the first 6 months. They were waiting and hoping, coming up with various measures to kick off the economy, but it's still at a standstill after 6 months. They're still right where they started, and nothing has improved yet for Thailand.
In fact, Economist has lowered its growth forecast next year to 4.1% from 5%. It shows that Thailand's economy might have a slow move starting from next year. And it's not really good for Thailand because next year is the ASEAN Economic Community, and it's definitely opening up the whole of Southeast Asia. And Thailand has to participate in the economic growth, because or not, it will be one of the losers in the competition between different Southeast Asian countries. Although the economy avoided a technical recession between April and June, it still shrank 0.1% in the first half regarding on the whole of Thailand's economy, and the finance ministry predicted on Thursday that annual growth would be 2.9% in the second half.
And of course, if they want to do something about it, they have to go back to first getting back the confidence of their own people, because if your own people don't believe in you, your consumers don't want to spend, they don't contribute to the economy, and nothing goes from there. And if your own people don't have faith in you, of course, it's even tougher for external investors to come in. And like you mentioned about the AEC, next year we are heading towards an integrated ASEAN economy, and a lot of countries are already picking up. Even Myanmar is actually attracting a lot of foreign investors. Indonesia is picking up. Malaysia will be hosting this whole thing. We have Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand really has to come up with something else, do something different than what they've been doing all this while if they have to keep up, or otherwise they will be left behind.
They need to stop playing politics and give candies to the Thai society. They need to step up their game in economy, especially in hasten the infrastructure projects that has been delayed for quite some time. And in order for the Thai society to enjoy a better economy, it will take a longer time, because it takes a longer time for probably the whole of Thailand to adopt and adapt the new Thai military regime.
But it seems that this month the government is announcing a couple of new economic measures that is worth of up to 364 billion baht, and that is focused on creating new jobs, income, and also helping the farmers in the country.
On another news related to economy is about the oil prices. Apparently, Malaysia is scrambling to boost revenues as oil prices drop. In fact, oil prices has been at a very low price since quite some time ago. This is due to probably a couple of different reasons. And because of the plunging oil price that is sapping revenues from Malaysia, as we all know, Petronas revenue accounts to 20% of Malaysia's GDP. And this is definitely a huge burden for the government because that means lesser revenue for our country.
And our Prime Minister he's also looking to trim the government's deficit to 3% of gross domestic product in 2015 as pressure mounts on emerging market economies to shrink these budget gaps ahead of potential capital outflows next year, especially when the US may raise interest rates. And when it comes to fuel prices, it's always something that is heatedly debated among Malaysians, whether it's general Malaysians or economists or politicians. And it's something that is very important because everybody, of course, needs to get around. They have either a motorcycle or a car, and a simple change in the oil prices can shake up the whole country for the whole day or whole week or even for the whole month. And we see all these protests and all. But of course, at the same time, we just tabled the new budget and we are heading towards a high-income nation, and there are some measures that are necessary for our Prime Minister to carry out. And
definitely. But one of the measures which is supposed to get in more money for the country's treasure coffer, but it seems like it has drawn more criticism than what it should. And one of the criticism is by Chua Hak Bin, an economist at Bank of America Merrill Lynch in Singapore. He said that when oil prices fall, Malaysia may lose out. The probability of a miss of the deficit target is high. And he also said that the goods and tax services, or GST, exclusion of many lists, there are about 900 zero rated items. It will not help Malaysia because when you start exempting a lot of items, you introduce loopholes. Implementations could be vague, and it defeats the original purpose of why there's a consumption tax like GST.
That's right. Even when it comes to GST, there is about 900 items that is being exempted from the list. And when that many items are exempted, of course, there are two ways to look at it. And one party would say that it's very thoughtful, it's very considerate of the government to put all these things into the list because there are some things that we really cannot afford to pay high prices when it comes to essential items, especially like medicines that everyone needs. But another party will also argue that if you have a long list of exempted items, then there is really no point of implementing GST in the first place because it defeats the whole purpose of it.
Mm-hmm. And it has a lot of revenue impact for the government because the government is expecting to increase its revenue budget, its revenue next year, but with such high exemption in the GST exemption list, and also when it comes to the plunging oil prices, it seems like Malaysia might not be able to make that much of a money. And of course, we have a very high budget for our next year's 2015 budget. It's definitely an issue that a lot of economies outside of Malaysia are concerned about, and I think Malaysians should be concerned about as well. Another area that is related to this country is about, not related, but related to this region, is about the 10 most dangerous in the world for women. Which country that is in the list?
We are actually looking at Manila here, which is, of course, in the Philippines, as the 10th most dangerous transportation in the world for women. And when it comes to safety of women, or even in terms of equality, in terms of awareness, we don't really have one country that we can really look up to, can we? And just to go through the list, actually, one of the worst ranked one is Bogota, which is in Colombia, and then we have Mexico City, we have Peru, we have India, and we also have Indonesia on the list.
Mm-hmm. And not to forget, apparently Malaysia is ranked worse than Manila at number 7, while Manila was ranked at number 10. These are the top 10s. One is for the worst ranking. 16 is the best. So it shows that countries like Bogota, Mexico City, Lima, Delhi, Jakarta, these are not really good in terms of providing a safer transportation system for women. And Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur is also on the list together with Manila.
And we are looking at, this report was of course based on reports of physical harassment such as groping, and even in some cases we have verbal harassment in public transports, in buses, in trains. And this is something that is quite hard to address, even if you look at KL itself. Because I do take the train all the time, and if you take the KTM, you will notice that even in the women's coach, there's always some guy who insists on going into the women's coach because there's no place in the general coach.
And probably there's no monitoring or...
That's right. There is no way to monitor that, because you're always wondering, like, isn't there a camera or isn't there someone who can do something about this? But so far nothing has been done. There's always a guy, or sometimes more than one guy, crowding in the women's coach, and nothing is being done about that.
Is it something that women should worry about? It's definitely, it's not so much of the women's coach that people should worry about. Is the fact that the whole transportation system do not provide an adequate adequate measures where women can feel safe even late at night. The lighting system and maintenance is not working well. There's not enough security personnel to help or guide the woman, and also the public transportation itself is not as efficient as we want it to be. So it can be dangerous for women as well.
And of course, to look at the whole picture, it shouldn't be focused on women alone, because things like that can happen to anyone when it comes to verbal harassment. Anyone can touch another person. It can happen to a guy, it can happen to a little child, it can happen to women, and all these countries that's being listed probably really need to look into this problem and come up with probably a systematic way to address this problem and make people feel safe. Because if somebody were to attack me or to touch me, I wouldn't even know who to complain to in the first place if I'm in the train itself.
You can complain to me. You can complain to me after the show, Gowri. Just kidding about that. Another area that I think a lot of society has problem with it is when it comes to the issue of LGBT or gay rights. They also have nowhere to complain, and we are talking about Singapore. They are on permanent parole, apparently. A 4-year battle ended yesterday when Singapore's High Court upheld the constitutionality of Section 377A of the country's penal code, which renders any man convicted of committing or abetting the commission of any act of gross indecency with another man liable to 2 years in prison.
And this court ruling upsetted a lot of people, especially human rights activists and a lot of LGBT supporters as well, because they were really hoping for a change this time, for the court to do something different about it, to probably be more flexible about it. But the court, like you mentioned, stuck by the Section 377A, which criminalizes sexual intimacy between men. And this has not turned out well for for the LGBT community
It has
in
not turned out
Singapore.
It has not turned out well, partly also because the court has only so much to do when it comes to imposing or overturning the constitutional law of its penal code. Another area that maybe there's still a light is about whether Singapore's legislature will take up the debate. So if the Parliament of Singapore are willing to debate about this and see the issue of LGBT as an abuse for this particular community and try to ensure that the law can be repealed, maybe there's still a way for LGBT can strengthen their rights.
And according to Boris Dietrich, who is the advocacy director of LGBT rights program at Human Rights Watch, he said that Singapore likes to advertise itself as a modern Asian country and a business destination, but this discrimination against the LGBT community is actually a whole step out, and it's not in line with international rights standards that guarantees protection. So he's pretty much saying that they are going against what they are advertising or projecting themselves to the world to be.
Like I said, Southeast Asia is a religious country. When it comes to religion, apparently a lot of issues that is against Christian values are the reason why issues like gay rights are still an issue that is being part of they have a law that cripple this group of community in Singapore, which is supposed to be a secular nation. So that's all from us. We will continue with a discussion by an up and coming R&B singer.